My next guest is Dr. Matthew Woods. Matthew has served for more than 12 years assisting students, educators, and schools in a variety of roles. His professional experience includes being a high school social studies teacher, a middle and high school assistant principal, a middle school principal, a director of student support services, an adjunct professor, and a field instructor for student teachers. Additionally, Dr. Woods hosts an education podcast, Leading Out of the Woods, and is the author of Digital PD for Educators and the children's book series, I Want to Be. Dr. Wood's leadership and innovative approaches have brought him recognition from numerous organizations, including ASCD. He was in the Emerging Leaders class of 2021 and the LG Happiness League. He earned a BS in History and Social Studies from Froome College, a certificate in MED in Educational Leadership and Administration from Virginia Tech, a graduate certificate in Education Law and Policy, and an education specialist in the middle grades education from the University of Georgia. He also holds an EDD in Educational Leadership and Administration from Radford University. Welcome to the podcast, Matthew.
Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm also a little impressed about all those certificates that you did post-master's before you got your doctorate. So
I know, right?
You're one of those who love to go back to school, just like me.
Yeah, we'll just say that. Yeah, but no, I've been very fortunate, very blessed, had some great opportunities, and I try to live the motto of being a lifelong learner. So anything I can add to the toolbox, I'm glad to.
Yeah. So we'll start off with tell me about a time when you were in the trenches and managed to crawl out.
That's a great question. I've been thinking about that when you told me I was going to be on here. But I think the one that comes to mind is when I was an assistant principal. We had a situation at a after school event, and it was kind of like an awards ceremony / session for a group of students. And so obviously, we had a variety of stakeholders there, parents, people in the community, so forth. And this parent, I remember, got called up to the stage, and it was almost like they were reading a portion of the award. So for the listeners out there, kind of like when you watch like the Grammys or the Oscars, they have somebody random come up there and they do like a little, almost like a transition, and then they kind of announce who the winner is. And I remember this parent went up there and they started off saying, I want to thank the science department, blah, blah, blah. And they started talking about a couple teachers, and they got to this one teacher. Now, mind you, this teacher was about to win this award or be recognized. And this person pretty much just started being very demeaning, very derogatory. And it was kind of like it caught everybody off guard.
Yeah.
And I remember I had stepped out of the auditorium. I think maybe I had to make a phone call or something. And a teacher ran up and was like, you've got to do something. You've got to go up there and stop this. And I remember the teacher's husband walked out. And he was upset, and he was saying some choice words, and he's like, hey, I'm about to go up there, da da da. And I said, hey, hold on, give me a second to kind of quarterback this and figure out what's going on. And I remember walking in there, and the auditorium was packed. Everybody was kind of in shock. We also had, school board members there. So we had a variety of different folks. So I'm just kind of setting the stage with listeners. Like, this wasn't like a simple after school thing. This was like, this was a big deal. And I remember thinking to myself as I was walking close to the stage, I was like, okay, if I was in her shoes, how would I feel right now? And what would I want somebody to do? And I remember in my head, I was like, I'd want somebody to yank this lady off the stage right now. And obviously then in my head, I'm like, oh my God, all right, school board members are here. What are they going to think? What are these other folks going to think? Da, da, da. And I remember it was one of those times where I just said, and I thought about advice I've gotten from my mentors over the year. Just do the right thing. Do the right thing, and things will work out for you. Even if you take some pushback or slack. And I remember I just walked up there, kind of cut the mic, was like, hey, you need to come with me. Walked out there. Of course, this lady's going off on me. Then her husband comes out there. He's going off on me because, of course, I'm the bad guy now. And I remember I was just so upset. And I was really embarrassed for that lady because she didn't deserve that. She was a phenomenal teacher. And I remember just telling them, like, you need to leave. You need to leave the building right now. And I remember getting yelled at, wait till I call the superintendent. You ain't gonna have a job. Just going on this whole rant. But I remember that was the first time me dealing with a situation where I found myself thinking about the politics behind the decision as well, especially for folks who are in leadership, because I think we all know politics is always at play. That was the first time I remember in a split second where I was like, okay, I'm really making a judgment call right now. Like, this really could go sideways really quickly, because I don't know what'll happen when I go up to the stage. And you have a variety of different folks, but that was one of the times where I just remember I just made that, it was just that gut call, that gut check. And the rest is history. It ended up working out for me. I didn't get fired, if anybody's wondering, and nothing bad happened. But it was one of those times when you talk about, being in the trenches, in the middle of a situation, having to make a split-second decision, but understanding that, hey, this is going to go one way or the other really quickly. And just kind of rolled the punches.
Yeah. And I think had you not done that, it probably would have gone a lot worse, right? Because you're first and foremost there to support your teachers, right? And then, you want to support the stakeholders and the parents, but what was happening wasn't appropriate. And like you saw, a lot of people were getting upset and shocked by what the parent was saying. So that's you did the right thing, like you said. So so you've been a principal, and then you've moved on now to a district position, which is director of student support services. And I've worked in a district that has a position like that, but just tell me kind of what that position entails. And I know when we were talking few months ago and I was going to be on your podcast, you were kind of going from one building to another and kind of not always in the same place.
Yeah. So my role as director of student support services, excuse me, it's I like to say it's like a jack of all trades, because it's kind of a hodgepodge, if you will, of a variety of things. So for example, being like the liaison for the district to law enforcement, being the district hearing officer for major discipline infractions or chronic discipline infractions, the truancy officer, so being the one to process truancy referrals and take students and families to court if need be for attendance related purposes, being the district lead for our school counselors, for the STL work that we do, being the point of contact for the Virginia High School League for our athletics and activities for our district. Oh my God, I'm hitting a brain fart right now. You put me on the spot. But there's a gazillion other. Also being a point of contact for a lot of crisis and safety calls and notifications. So I like to kind of think about it as, certain things happen at a school. Obviously, a principal or an assistant principal has to call it to the district, say, hey, this is going on. We've had this major infraction, or here's kind of what's going on. I might need some advice on these next steps. So it's kind of like the coach in the background. I actually had a conversation with a buddy of mine looking at a similar role. And I told him, I said, I honestly like to think about it now. If you're watching like a football game, and you're one of the coordinators up there in the booth, and you're seeing everything from that vantage point, and you're kind of coaching out, and you're whispering in the coach's ear downstairs. And he's like, oh, okay. And I said, that's honestly a good way that I kind of think about my role and what happens. But then sometimes if need be, if I need to head out to a building or do something for support, I'm there for it. So it is a very unique role. It is, like you said, not all divisions have a role like that. For divisions that do, some actually have it combined with special ed department. So, I know, like, when I go to conferences and talk to other colleagues, a lot of times they'll ask me, and I say, hey, we in our division, we actually have a director of special ed. And she handles all the special ed stuff. But I know in other divisions, sometimes it's combined. So that's, I know one of the things that I know when I talk to a lot of my counterparts is somewhat kind of different sometimes.
Yeah.
But I really love my job. You know, when folks are with me and they see my phone ring, and if they kind of hear like, what did that person just say in the background? Like, what is going on? You know, it's like those calls that kind of come in through me, it gives me a very good perspective. And I tell folks it really kind of helps keep me sharp, because I was telling a buddy of mine the other day, was a principal, and she was talking about, crazy calls. I get these crazy calls, or this crazy parent right here is always calling about this, da, da, da. And I said, okay, imagine being in a role where I get all those calls.
Yeah.
Like, you only get them for your school. I get them for like the whole division. Like, so, just kind of, put it in perspective. And, but I actually, I love my job. I work with amazing people. And I'm just very fortunate, very blessed.
Yeah, and that sounds very similar to when I was a dean in Colorado Springs. They had somebody who did those things, the truancy officer, and working kind of with the when kids were getting expelled and those types of things. And I was the building representative going to those meetings, right? So you do have a specific amount of your job that is scheduled, like those truancy meetings, and perhaps maybe a little bit of training as well in terms of safety at different schools. But then you probably get called out, like you said, if there is some type of maybe evacuation or unplanned or emergency, or thinking that there might be some type of a police presence that needs to be involved at the school. So I take it you come out for a lot of those things.
Yeah, definitely. But we try to be proactive. I try to be visible as much as I can. So that way, when I do show up, folks aren't like, oh crap, something bad's happening. And I always kind of think about it like when I was a building administrator. Like, I didn't want to walk in a classroom and a kid be like, oh, who is he taking with him now? Who did something wrong? It's like, hey, I'm coming in here just to observe or give, teacher feedback. I'm not just coming in here for a discipline thing. So I try to kind of operate in that same mindset, and make sure I'm just as visible as possible, and try to build relationships with folks. So that way, when I do show up, that, folks don't always kind of jump to an assumption about what it might be.
Yeah. No, you want to come across as somebody who's there to support the students if they know who you are, rather than somebody who's there to get a kid kicked out of school, because that's our first, like you said, that's our first assumption. Like, what did I do now? Okay. So as I mentioned in your bio, you've published a few books, most recently Digital PD for Educators, and you co-authored that. So tell me a little bit about that book.
Yeah, shout out to my co-author, Dr. Samantha Fesich, if she's listening. We co-wrote this book, Digital PD for Educators, and it came from the premise of helping educators really kind of think about and understand ways to utilize digital platforms, digital apps, digital spaces for professional development. With all of the craziness and the negativity and just overall bad stuff, right? That COVID and the pandemic has brought to the forefront, there are some positives that have come out of it. I tell people, it's really caused educators and students and families to really kind of think differently, for example, about like how we connect with people, like how we're having this podcast right now, doing it through Zoom. And one thing that I saw and my co-author saw as well is that a lot of folks, even if you ask, like, for example, like the listeners out there, if you ask most people, can technology help you? Most people are like, yeah, duh, yeah, it can help me. But, and some folks will have that, but, and then they have reservations. And typically the reservations come from not really just a fear of what it could do. It's a fear that you really don't understand how to utilize it. So then you start making up all these crazy assumptions. And I know for educators, one of the things we hate is when you go into a space, especially with students, and they know more than you. And that just makes a lot of educators very hesitant. So when we talk about technology, a lot of the kids that we have nowadays, they can run circles around us, laps around us when it comes to, you know, these tablets and all these kind of digital devices and apps and so forth. But at the same time, everything that we do, even if you're one of these folks who say, hey, I'm old school, I'm old fashioned, everything you do now is related to technology and understand some type of digital space. So the book really just kind of became our collective resource to provide to educators how to think through these things. So when, for any of the listeners out there, if you're interested, when you get the book, you'll actually see it kind of resembles more of a workbook. So it's not like that we're just dropping nuggets on you of ways to utilize Facebook, ways to utilize, for example, podcasts. You know, we go through a couple scenarios how you can use podcasts for professional development. And then we actually write out a couple scenarios of like a principal with a teacher, and then like I think a department head utilizing a podcast to talk about these different strategies. But then we start highlighting all the positives. You know, I didn't have to hold somebody after school for an hour and a half. Everybody had access to the podcast link.
Yeah.
They had a collective time to listen to it. Everybody had access to a Google Doc to plug in their notes about it. So then when we met the following week, everybody was good to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
no, and I think a lot of people don't necessarily look at those out of the box ways of doing PD, right? Which is something I've been doing. I've been listening to educational podcasts for years. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and so like I said, it talks through some scenarios. It gives some concepts for folks to think about. But then, like I said, within the book, there's actually spaces for you to write notes, spaces for example, to help you create a tweet if you've never created a tweet. And for the listeners out there, I know some of y'all are laughing that I'm saying that, and some of y'all are like, "Ooh, he calling me out." It's all love either way, but it provides these spaces and opportunities to help people grow. And the feedback we've gotten on the book has been absolutely amazing. So I definitely encourage any of your listeners out there, if they're interested, either reach out to me in my contacts or take a look to pick up the book.
Yeah, so it sounds like it has a little bit of everything in terms of what educators can use and how they can teach with different tools, like you said. It made me think of like the Kahoot app, which, you know, I started using maybe 8 years ago, and, you know, I saw some used in the building this past school year still. And, you know, there's paid plans a lot of teachers are using now, but, you know, there's a lot of kids that do, you know, they kind of hack in, and they're like extra students playing because one student's hacking in and like basically winning all the answers, you know. So that's the example of kids you know, running circles around us on those apps. So like, what do you do when a kid does that, right? So yeah, I think there's a lot of nuggets to be had there, and it's good that people can use that as a workbook. You've also written a book as a children's book series called I Want to Be ... which came out of you writing to represent your biracial children. And there's 7 different books, as far as I saw on your website, with various occupations. So tell me a little bit about those books.
Yeah, so the book series I Want to Be, we're up to 7 books. Yeah, I had to think about it myself. It's been crazy. We're up to 7 books now in the series, and it actually stars my son Hilton. So the like you'd referenced, you know, he's biracial, and you know, I'm an educator. You know, my wife, she's educated. She's a social worker, so education is very important to us. And so obviously, you know, getting all the little books for his room, you know, trying to set it up, you know, do everything right,
Yeah.
with the little flashcards. And one of the things that I really started to zone in on, her and I, was when we were looking for books just to kind of represent our family, like how difficult it was.
Yeah.
And I remember, I remember, I think I was, well, I'm sorry, I won't call out store on here. I don't want you to get sued, but I was in a store,
Yeah.
a pretty popular store,
Uh-huh.
and I'm like going through all these books, and I remember getting so mad and worked up because I'm like, why is it so hard for me to find a book that relates to us? Like, it really started like getting under my skin one night. So
Mm.
come home, I think her and I are upstairs talking, and I had mentioned it to her. So I want to say maybe a month or so later was my birthday. So she ordered me one of those books where you can, a lot of you, I think y'all are familiar with it. You can look them up online. You kind of plug in some information about you, and they kind of make the books and the characters like you,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not really like you, but it's supposed to be you.
Mm-hmm.
So, had our names in it, and she's like, look at y'all. And I'm looking at it, and the first thing I said was, well, that dude don't look like me. He looks
Mm-hmm.
too good to. I mean, he looked like a model. I'm like, he ain't got all these wrinkles and bags under his eyes. Dealing with this kid all day. I'll tell you that. And, my hair's starting to thin out a little bit. I'm like, he got a head full of hair. That don't look like me.
Yeah.
So I guess she felt some kind of way, and we kind of got into a little argument. She's like, you know what? If you can do better, you go and write your own book.
Yeah.
I was like, I can. And I think I grabbed my laptop, I went in the kitchen, and I remember just sitting there, and the idea just came. I was like, I want to be,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I want to be a pilot. I want to be a software developer. I want to be a lawyer. I want to be a CEO. And I remember just kind of thinking the 4 or 5 books, like the idea just kind of plopped out. It's like, all right. And I was like, well, man, I need a character. Who'd be the character? And I was like, my son. Duh.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, from there, uh, I wrote the book out, and it just kind of grew into what it is now, and it's been amazing. The kind of
Mm-hmm.
feedback
Mm-hmm.
that I've gotten on it, where folks have reached out. I know one of the biggest joys with the series is when I have teachers, schools, families reach out to me and just say, you don't know how much we needed something like this, or
Mm-hmm.
how this book made these kids feel,
Yeah.
regardless of their background.
Mm-hmm.
Just giving them like a glimpse, giving them, provided windows and mirrors for kids, where they could see themselves and then see others in a different light. And yeah, it's like I said, I love it. I'm actually working on several more as we speak, especially going into the summer, so I have more time to kind of get those creative juices going and write some more out. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, we're looking forward to adding more to the collection.
Mm-hmm. And you said, so the first, it was kind of a do-it-yourself book where the computer generates an image, or kind of an AI generates the image. So do you now just use an Illustrator for the drawings, or how do you do the
Oh
drawing?
yeah, so the one my wife ordered, I
Mm-hmm.
don't know what company she
Mm-hmm.
used. Because like I said, that guy was a model. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
it ain't me.
Mm-hmm.
I've been fortunate. I've linked up with the artists
Okay.
who actually sketched them all out. So for example, for the listeners, when you get the book or any of the books, you'll actually see a picture of me and my son in the book.
Mm-hmm.
So then when you're like reading the book, you'll be like, oh yeah, that's them. Like it looks just like them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's great because it's very special to me. Regardless of how many books we sell or whatever, it's just amazing now, because my son's at the age now, like he'll be reading books, and sometimes he'll pull them out, and he'll be like, hey daddy, look, these are my books. And he'll be like, that's me right there. That's me. And yeah, I'm doing this and I'm doing that. And to hear him say that at such an early age. And I think, as educators, a lot of times you just have to give somebody, like, they just have to see it. You could say you have a goal objective, but when you can see it, and then you have a clear understanding, like, I can go from point A to point B. Like, I can actually do that. It speaks volumes. And, it just really gets to me whenever he says that now. Or like he'll run up like, hey dad, I want to read my book. Or my books. And I'm like, all right, bud. And then but after a while, when we read them like 10 or 12 times, I'm like, hey, you need to get your mom to read them. I get, I've already said it back to you 10, so, mommy
Yeah.
can read them now. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, no, and it made me think of like when I listed some of your educational accomplishments that you're somebody that goes for it, right? You went for those degree programs, those certification programs, and then when you saw that there was a problem, in this bookstore that needed fixing, right? And I think like just all the years I've been in education, just the representation that's lacking in children's books for biracial children, right? And I think like you saw that problem and you went and fixed it, and then having that memory also of your son at this young age, right, is that character represented in the book, I think is really special. And like you said, educators listening who want to add to their classroom library I'll add the link in the show notes for where you can find the books. And there's a website for them as well. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So I mentioned in the bio as well that you got an award. It's called the LG Happiness League. So you told me a little bit about this is something that you were selected for SEL work.
Definitely, yeah. So it was pretty dope. Got contacted about this award. Like I said, it's in conjunction with the company LG, I think Discovery Education, several other companies, organizations, but they had selected a variety of educators across the country based on work related to SEL that you're doing either in your schools or divisions, and things that you're just doing to inspire other educators and do things in your community. So it was very fortunate, a blessing to be selected. But then there was, out of that small group that was selected, then it was several of us smaller who I guess kind of became finalists, or however you want to, I forgot what the next tier was. But we were told that our pictures that we had submitted with it was like this little superhero cape they sent us. It sounds corny, y'all, but if you look it up online, my wife said I look good. But you had to submit this little picture of what they sent you, and I was one of the ones selected that they actually showed my picture at Times Square. And I remember, they called and they said, "Hey, you're one of the, I think, 4 or 5 selected. We've got the billboard at Times Square. You're gonna be right there in the middle." I'm like, "Oh my goodness!" And like I had told you earlier before we started recording, they told me the date, and I was like, "Man, I'm already supposed to be in Salt Lake City. Like I'm supposed to be going all the way across the other side of the country to visit family. So I can't, I'm sorry, I've already have plans." So I remember I was kind of tore up about it. And I don't think my mom, dad, they probably didn't believe me. I was like, "Hey, I'm actually supposed to be on Times Square." And I remember, I want to say a week later, I guess as the ad was running, they took pictures of all of us like on our ad, and they actually framed it and sent it to me, which is real dope. So I actually still have that picture. It's actually in my office. And it's funny because people will walk in sometimes and I'll, hear them kind of look like, "Oh, pretty cool. Hey, you got your little picture made like you were in Times Square." And I'm like, "No, that's like legit. That actually was up there." And I can always see them kind of double take. And I remember I had one parent one time, I turned around and they actually Googled it on their phone to look it up, which was so hilarious. And I guess instead of, like looking at it like, "Okay, he telling the truth," I remember they held it up to me and the other person. They're like, "Hey, you were really there? Like, you were really up there?" And I'm like, "Why would you think I'm lying about this?" Like, okay. But whatever. But yeah, but it was an amazing opportunity. And I think, it's always a blessing when folks recognize you're doing good work. So yeah, so I definitely appreciate it.
So you're a podcast host as well, and I've been on your podcast, Leading Out of the Woods. So tell me a little bit about why you started the podcast, what type of people you interview, and what audience you like to kind of speak to.
Yeah. So Small Gray is actually leading out the woods. We intentionally left the of off. I tell the listener, I tell folks, they ask me that all the time. One, as y'all can hear, I'm really country. I am from Southwest Virginia. And two, it just at the time it just sounded like rhymed with it. Lean Out the Woods. It just kind of flowed, so you didn't realize the of was off. So bad grammar on my part, but I will tell y'all the podcast has been an amazing. It is I think as educators that grind wears on us, the stress, all the different things coming at you. And I tell folks the podcast is actually my way to disconnect. It's a way just to have amazing conversations with amazing guests like yourself on a variety of topics that all educators are struggling with, that are trying to think through, that are trying to grapple with, and provide a space for learning, right? But absolutely free. Like, I just put it out there. And I've been very fortunate in my career and blessed that I've been able to bump shoulders and connect with amazing educators all across the country. And I remember really thinking about something a friend of mine said. He said, "Hey man, you know a lot of different people." And I was like, "Yeah." And he was like, no, like a lot of different people. Like, I remember one time he said, folks that would cost a school or a principal $5,000 to $10,000 just to get them in the building. And you can text them right now and be like, "Hey, I got a question for you," or "Hey, can I run this by you?" And I said, "Man, I never thought about it like that." And I remember him just saying, like, "Man, it'd be great if you could get them together to help share that with other people." And I'll be honest, that was one of the main reasons really that kind of came from the podcast. And kind of like with the book, I remember I sat down one day, I was like, "Okay, how do I start a podcast?" Literally watched a couple YouTube clips. Buddy of mine sent me a great article about podcasts, how to get started. Researched it, got my ducks in a row, reached out to amazing contacts I had and said, "Hey, this is what I'm trying to do. Will you help support me?" Everybody I reached out to, I remember, was like, "We love it. Let's go. Let's get it." And what was crazy was, I remember, I think when I said, "Hey, I want to start this," and I started scheduling people, I had actually scheduled way too much. So like when I started the podcast, for the listeners out there, I was already booked for like the first 6 months. Like, it was insane, but it kind of was a blessing to kind of show me, hey, what he said to me was right. I do know a lot of folks that I could extend out to. And yeah, from there, the podcast has grown. I think as of this recording that I'm doing with you, we're at episode, I think that's been released, 89, 90.
Okay.
So what's been 2 years? Yeah, going on 2 years, because we release every 2 weeks, even through the summer. Tell folks we keep it going. And it's just been great, folks. The amount of people that have reached out to me and that it has further let me connect with all across the country. Just, folks like, "Hey man, I really need to hear this," or "Thank you for what you're doing," or "Hey, you need to talk to this person and help expand on this." So it's been it's really filled my cup. I'll tell you like that. It's really kind of helped rejuvenate me and really kind of helped me, like I said, be a real like stress reliever. Like, it's really kind of, like I said, help me unplug and help me think and grow and help other educators grow too.
Yeah, and I think the same goes for me. Like, just that it fills my bucket, right? It's that personalized PD, and just getting to know these people that do charge a lot of money to come and speak to schools, and having those conversations. And I recognize a lot of my own feelings in what you've said about podcasting. So yeah, it's great, and I'll make sure there's a link to the podcast in the show notes. Well, we've had a great conversation around your experience in education, your current role as a director of student support services, some of your writing, and the award that you won. Out of everything we talked about, what's one thing you'd like listeners to remember?
Yeah. Oh, the one thing I would like listeners to remember is, and really just for all the educators out there, just stay encouraged. Stay encouraged. know you're making a difference.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing, and I'll say this to everybody out there, for the newbies who are getting into the field, for the ones who are, middle of the road, and for the ones who are, at the end of your career,
Mm-hmm.
always stay true to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I went through a spot where I had to realize that, this is me. This is Matt. This is what I stand for. This is what I do. Going back to, I think, the first question you asked me, when, me being, oh God, early 20s, wet behind the ears, administrator, I'm still trying to figure stuff out. And I was like, hey, this isn't right. I'm gonna have to make a judgment call and just walk up there and roll with the punches. And I've always tried to carry myself like that throughout my career, and it's worked. It's been a blessing. But I say that to say that if it didn't work, right, that scenario I told you about earlier, if it went sideways, if I had a board member had been like, "What is this kid doing? Get him out of here," I would have looked myself in the mirror and been okay, because I stayed true to myself. So for the listeners out there, just always remember to stay true, true to yourself, true to your compass, and things will work out for you.
Where can people connect with you and find you online?
Yeah. Like I said, thanks for having me on here. It's been great. Folks can reach out to me. Best way to get at me is my website, www.leadingoutthewoods.com. So www.leadingoutthewoods.com. All my contacts are on there, all my social media tags, Twitter, Facebook, the whole nine, right? They're all on there. You can get to the podcast, you can get to the books, you can get to the master course that we've created for educators out there. Everything that you want to know about me is there. So like I said, www.leadingoutthewoods.com. And I do respond to messages, emails, tweets. Sometimes it takes me longer than 24 hours because I do have 2 little ones and I have a day job, as everybody knows. So I am always busy, but I promise you, if you reach out, I love to connect and collaborate, and anything I can do to help somebody, I will.
Okay, well, thank you so much for being on the Out of the Trenches podcast today. It was a pleasure speaking with you and hearing about your philosophy and just what serves you in your role.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.